in the COVID management. A lot of us have a lot of experiences in different hospitals. Some of the experiences were shared on that day, and it was decided that why not to document these experiences so that in the subsequent coming years or the coming times these can be used by the people. We'll come up in the form of a publication. So we have already sent you a mail requesting you to please share your experiences, 1, 2, or 3 pages at the most, so that one of us can put it in the form of a document and it can be shared with other members. So with this, I'll not take much of time. I'm really grateful that all of you have come and joined the webinar, and we'll continue this practice till we are able to meet physically. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President, sir. Now on behalf of Academy of Hospital Administration, I welcome Colonel Dr. Surekha Kashyap. She does not need a very elaborate introduction because she is a life member and a very active member of Academy, being the president of the Western chapter of AHA as well. But still, completing the formality, she did MDHA in 1998 from Pune University. She has got over 33 years of experience in the Armed Forces Medical Services. She has planned 7 military hospitals of bed strength between 250 to 800 hospitals, managed medical stores of 2 big army hospitals in Delhi and Pune, commanded 2 military hospitals in Punjab and Assam. And she's got over 12 years of experience in the faculty and subsequently as the head of Department of Hospital Administration at AFMC Pune. She took voluntary retirement in December 2020. And of course, her publications, 46 papers, and focus on quality and community health are the key essence. Now I will request our speaker, Dr. Surekha, to please proceed with this, and to the instructions to the member. If there are any questions, queries to the speaker, please put in the chat box. I'll keep on compiling these questions and ask her at the suitable time. And ma'am, your topic may go up to 40 minutes, and thereafter there will be 10 minutes discussion and QA session also. So I think we will keep the time with us, and over to you, ma'am. And I will request all other who are not speaking to keep on mute mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, my heartfelt gratitude and thanks to the Academy of Hospital Administration headquarters for giving me this opportunity to be able to interact with so many members of our specialty. Thank you so much, sirs. It's a privilege to have a platform to speak where so many of my gurus and teachers are here. So I'm really humbled for that. I start with bowing my head before all my teachers. A small clarification that in my department I was the professor, but not the HOD. With that little correction, we'll start with the topic which is very close to my heart. Emotional intelligence is something that we already deal in when we are teaching organization behavior to our students. And artificial intelligence is the new kid on the block, and I have some interest in this for a very long time. Computers fascinate me, and artificial intelligence has fascinated me. Software development fascinates me. So both these sides of the coin are equally beloved to me. So why have we chosen to have the heading of the lecture as AI versus EI? That is because there is a perception, whether right or wrong, that the permeation of artificial intelligence with so much of machines and machine learning and ready-made diagnosis and ready-made treatment modalities into healthcare will somehow diminish the human contact between patients and doctors. And some skeptics are saying that it's already happening. Doctors are becoming more and more distanced from the humanitarian aspect of healthcare. And there are proponents who swear by artificial intelligence. They are all for AI. They say it is the most useful tool available to doctors and healthcare workers worldwide because from the administrative perspective, it saves time, resources, and energy. And as hospital administrators, isn't that what we want? We want efficiency, and we want the job to be done quickly, cheaply, and with less utilization of energy and less consumption of manpower. That's what AI does. There are those who are very passionate about emotional intelligence. They say that precisely because healthcare deals with people and not with, for example, cars or any other production of consumable, the humane touch will always remain essential for getting optimum results in a setting of healthcare provision. Let us see how it pans out. So first, how did artificial intelligence come about? The first time we started reading about artificial intelligence was not very far away. It was in 2013 that the first face of AI became visible in the form of machine learning. So machine learning is the most basic form of artificial intelligence and can be supervised, it can be unsupervised. The unsupervised part of machine learning is also important in healthcare because it captures the basic demographic data, height, weight, name, address, whatever you want to capture, which can be done by a paramedical staff as well. But there is this component called supervised component of machine learning, which is very, very essential to us if we want to embrace it wholeheartedly, wherein this is the domain of the clinicians or the nurses, where the machine learning works, but under human supervision. In fact, it is the machine learning tool is developed by very, very qualified professionals. And what it does basically is that it constructs data algorithms to extract features from data, like patient traits or medical outcomes. So basically it tries to simplify data gathered from a large population of similar people and then draws a result based on interpretation, which is through a machine, not through the human brain. So what is artificial intelligence in short is an attempt to reconstruct the cognitive functions of a human being. What our brain does, the artificial intelligence expects a machine to do. In 2014, something called as SVM came in, support vector machine. And here it classifies subjects into easily identifiable groups and studies the variations. For example, age-wise variation, gender-wise variation, even race-wise variation from African subcontinent, Asian, European, American, like that. So it is a step further. And this is a little bit more complicated because it groups the data into complex but yet easily identifiable and analyzable constructs, and it has been classically used for identifying biomarkers which can predict the onset and the prognosis of neurological and psychiatric disorders like Alzheimer's disease. In 2016, something called as deep learning came, where a neural network was designed with several layers of complexities, something which we learn in operation research techniques when we are talking about simulation modeling and all. So that is deep learning. And here, this is absolutely essential in healthcare because we all know that medicine is as much an art as a science. It is not simple mathematics where you can say 1 + 1 is equal to 2. That is why the next layer is CNN. In 2017, convolutional neural network came in, and this handles a very high dimensional data, which has again a large number of traits. It is used to assist disease prediction. It predicts which is the kind of person who is likely to develop type 2 diabetes by the age of 40, by the age of 50, by the age of 60. It can predict. And this we have been learning as risk factors. When we used to learn risk factors for acute myocardial infarction, we used to count on our fingers: obesity, sedentary lifestyle, smoking, high cholesterol and all that, family history of heart attack, type 2 diabetes. So CNN takes it all and gives you the prediction in numerical and quantifiable terms. It also helps in diagnosis of complex problems like, for example, cancer, where you have to not only diagnose the cancer, but also decide which grade it falls into, and prediction of outcome, which is so important for us hospital administrators, because it has a serious overlays with the insurance, health insurance business. And amazingly, AI has been found to have 90% sensitivity and specificity in the diagnosis of some diseases like diabetic retinopathy. In fact, IBM Watson has been regularly beating clinicians in diagnosing, for example, complex types of cancers, and 87.6% accuracy in predicting, for example, the risk of stroke. So the three areas where AI has been used with tremendous success, I'll come to that later, are neurology, that means stroke, cancer, and cardiology. Diagnosis of complex congenital cardiac disorders or MI, so diagnosing the thrombus and all that. There are these domains of artificial intelligence, which 2 or 3 I have already covered, but we must know that AI is not just one thing. It is growing by leaps and bounds. Every month, when we go online, we will see another article on AI. Either the tool used for artificial intelligence has been refined. So starting, as I said, from the machine vision, image recognition, which was simple. First of all, it was used for assisting radiologists to quickly go through hundreds of X-ray films and reach a diagnosis. It is used for robotics, planning, scheduling, and optimization. Some expert systems, then conversion of speech to text and text to speech. So these were the initial ones. Then we came to natural language processing, which the clinicians, it is the clinician's domain, and here the clinical notes are translated into a form which is recognizable by a machine. And this is done through a process of translation of a written clinical note into a language which the computer or the system or the software understands. That has already been fed into it, and that is usually done with the full cooperation of professionals. It cannot be done by a non-professional person. Then you do classification and clustering, and this we learned long ago as DRGs, when the JCHO and all, when they talk about packaging, when we talk about disease packages, that is what is the meaning of classification and clustering, that everything related to the appendix will come under one group, and then it will be divided into subgroups. And then machine learning, as I said, involves deep learning and predictive analytics. So predictive analytics is becoming very, very important for preventive and social medicine people, and developed societies which would like to see a reduction in advanced stage of cancer, or those illnesses which are preventable or easily treatable if caught early, like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, and relatively difficult to treat when diagnosed later. And that goes for all cancers as well. And it is now getting into cardiology, because so many people are losing their lives and their quality of life to cardiac ailments in 21st century. So in healthcare, the AI journey has, as I said, we started seeing ECG machines long ago. We saw them in the 90s also. The machines which used to not only take your ECG, but when the ECG printout used to come, some kind of diagnosis used to be printed on that. They would tell you that there is ectopic, or there is a ventricle fibrillation, or there is an atrial fibrillation and all that. And laboratory, certainly fully automatic biochemical analyzers used to print out not only the results, but also the normal range and would highlight in different color or in bold letters an abnormal result. So the flagging which we talk about as hospital administrators, that abnormal results should be flagged for the convenience of the clinician, the machine does it. And certainly it is faster. And then in radiology, several studies were conducted. And in radiology, there is a concept of inter-operator variability of results. That means a large subset of radiologists were requested to give their opinion on a selected set of images. You can, it could be normal X-rays, digital X-rays, CT scans, or MRIs. And there is always an inter-operator variability. If there are 5 radiologists, they would tend to not reach the same conclusion after seeing exactly the same film 20% of the time. So inter-operator variability ranged from 10 to 20%. Whereas when the AI took over, each time you gave the set of the films to the AI, the variability dropped down to below 10%. So the correctness of the diagnosis in radiology was the first thing to be studied in a properly constructed study model, and it was published in around the turn of the century, to 2000-2005 ke beech mein. Lot of these studies were done to explain to the healthcare workers that the AI is capable of doing the job faster and with less inter-operator variability. So because hospital administrators love standardization and love a reliable result, this is relevant to all of us. Then the AI came into clinical decision making, where treatment algorithms were made. Again, treatment algorithms are excellent modalities to support the clinician in making a decision so that a crucial step is not missed out. And these are now part of the standard textbooks of medicine as well. And they are on the smartphones of almost all the young clinicians that I have interacted with in my career. Robotic surgery certainly is the ultimate AI achievement. Then it is being used for screening for diseases with the aim of reducing the disease burden before it becomes very, very costly for a human being who is paying out of pocket, for an insurance system where the health insurance company may have to pay for a disease which could have been prevented. Ultimately prevents a drain of resources at a national and even a global level. It is also an excellent patient assistant, because now this we have seen, I think COVID has taught us this like nothing has, because through telemedicine, the patient can reach out to a primary healthcare provider and it can assist the patient in seeking the correct advice from the comfort of his home. And even in the hospital scenario, the patient is better able to communicate with a doctor who may be busy elsewhere but is available for a video call, etc. And the real-time data of the patient can be transmitted to the primary clinician whenever the patient finds an abnormality, and that abnormality is being informed to the patient by an alarm, which is usually audio or visual or both. So as I said, the 3 areas where AI has made amazing strides in healthcare is the diagnosis, screening and diagnosis of cancer, prediction of stroke, and diagnosis of cardiac problems. And in robotics, the AI has helped in multiple ways. It not only, it helps, the prosthetics help the patient to be mobile. There is early detection, the diagnosis, the decision making, the treatment, the end of life care, in research and in training, because AI helps us to take out the relevant. We all do search on our academic websites through keywords, right? So searching through keywords involves AI. And AI has been used in training, and that too in healthcare organizations. So it assists in wellness by assisting screening programs. As I explained before, it helps in early detection, diagnosis, decision-making, treatment, end-of-life care, and also it is a 360-degree assistance and entry of AI in all aspects of healthcare now has already happened, and it is only likely to grow. And this is a slide to share with everyone that from 2016 till 2021, this is a study which has been done by Inkwood Research Institute, North America Artificial Intelligence in Healthcare Market by country. And they've studied only 2 countries, United States and Canada, probably because of their convenience. But it is an indicator of where we are going. Between 2016 to 2020-21, if you see, the increase has been about 2,000 times. But the prediction is that between 2021 to 2026, in $1 billion, the revenue from the AI market is going to cross some 12,000 billion US dollars in America, and in Canada it will be around 3,000 US dollars. So it is growing exponentially. So it is projected to grab the healthcare market in such an exponential manner in the next about 4 or 5 years to come. We will see this. It is already on track. And the reason we are investing so much in AI is because it pays. What about emotional intelligence on the other hand? This concept actually came into being in 90s, but in 1930s, we have all learned in our OB lectures and in our leadership and management lectures that it was known that social intelligence does impact work performance. Okay, Hawthorne's experiment, we all remember. In 1980s, it was known to leadership researchers that interpersonal skills do impact the overall performance of the workers working in your organization as well as the overall performance of the organization. But it was not until 1990s that the father of emotional intelligence, a science writer for New York Times called Dan Goleman, started writing and researching about EI. And he published a book in 1995 which became a bestseller. In 1998, the Harvard Business Review published an article stating that the success of an organization, of an individual, is not dependent so much on his IQ, that means the intelligence quotient, which used to be the standard test of intelligence till then worldwide, but on something called as emotional intelligence. And that article got a readership of which was higher than the last 40 years of readership of any article in the HBR history. And that is when suddenly the whole world got up and started talking about EI. And basically, emotional intelligence is the social and emotional abilities of a person. And they are linked to successful work performance, and they comprise of 5 components. There are 5 components of EI. The person has to be aware, self-aware of his strengths and weaknesses. The Johari's window, which we say that, known to self, known to others. So known to self should be 100%. Self-regulation, the person should be able to moderate his or her response to life situations or to conflict situations and be able to choose the response deliberately and not be that knee-jerk reaction that somebody is shouting at you and your first reaction is to shout right back, how dare he. So self-regulation is self-discipline. Then self-motivation. It also means that the person does not need anyone to goad him into achievement of his or her goals. Person is motivated. Then the social awareness. Now this is so important so that you are aware of the environment in which you are trying to do the job. The same person can fail who has succeeded in another culture, another state, another background, another country, because he or she has not taken the trouble to study and understand the society in which he is delivering the particular service or product. And then social skills. This is something which is extremely important to all of us as hospital managers, because unless we have the skill to use our emotional intelligence to get the job done. And that is the hallmark of an administrator. The administrator is the person who gets the job done. So this social skill, to be able to get the job done, is also a component of emotional intelligence. That it's not enough for you to have a talented workforce. It is not enough for you to be a very intelligent manager. The last skill, if you don't have, you will not be able to succeed. Therefore, these are the domains of emotional intelligence. And it looks a little bit like Johry's window, but we'll just see self and social. So here it is, others ki jagah ho gaya hai social, is on the x-axis, and on the y-axis is recognition and regulation. So when you recognize who you are, when I recognize who I am, then it creates self-awareness. I understand my mood, and I understand what irritates me, what makes me happy, what makes me get out of my way, what makes you get out of bed in the morning. Do you know that? Do you even know that? So that is self-awareness. That is one domain. The green domain is social. Social recognition, understanding and recognizing the society in which you are working. So are you working in a public enterprise? Are you working in a private enterprise? And for us, are you working in an armed forces environment? You have to understand the emotional makeup of the other people with whom you are expected to work, and also your customers. Who are you providing the service to? Are you even taking a feedback from them? So you take a feedback from your colleagues, from your seniors, from your juniors, and you take a feedback from your customers to improve your social recognition score. Then you come down to the yellow one, which is self-management. Are you able to keep a control over your own reaction, your behavior, your words, and ultimately your thoughts? That your thoughts are always positive and you are thinking of the good of the organization as well as trying to improve your own self. So the ability to control and redirect disruptive impulses, control those actions or words which will disrupt the environment. And finally, in blue is the social skills, where you regulate the society. It's very difficult, but that is what leaders do, right? They guide people to do what they want them to do. And that is social skill. The proficiency in managing relationships and building networks, are the ability to find common ground, find out what interests everybody. They'll all start talking. Everyone is passionate about something or the other. Find what people are passionate. And that is why the easiest way to understand emotional intelligence is what we call soft skills. So emotional intelligence is the degree of soft skills that we possess, and that's why it's a non-cognitive domain. The EI journey in healthcare has been equally interesting. We started with calling the doctor a god, and the doctor used to be a confidant and should, even today, be a confidant. So do you confide in someone with whom you have no emotional connect? Can a doctor display emotional connection with a patient and still not break down crying when the patient passes away? Doctor is an advisor. Can you really advise someone whose confidence you have not won over? Will he even obey your advice? So, EI has been found to be extremely important in making patients follow the doctor's advice. They don't follow the advice if the doctor does not have EI. Doctor is a friend, so you can't be a friend unless you are emotionally connected. But today, the other thing is happening. The patients are losing their temper, and unfortunately, there are so many reported incidents of violence against doctors. So this is negative. We have gone into negative, that if there is this much of violence which is being perpetrated against healthcare providers, somewhere we have totally lost the emotional connect with our patients. And healthcare EI has got multiple roles. If healthcare depends on patient, doctor, and administrator, if there are these three pillars of successful healthcare, then between the patient and doctor, there has to be trust, dignity, privacy, consent, and compliance. And all these things have been studied through formal studies and have been published as articles worldwide, starting from 2002 onwards. I've seen beautiful articles showing how, a higher EI score amongst healthcare providers was linked to better compliance amongst the patient. Between the patient and the administrator, there is a bond of EI which is dependent on safety, comfort, convenience, speed, and transparency of systems. So basically, violence or court cases happens when the patient perceives that there is lack of transparency from the administration side, or also sometimes from the doctor side, like informed consent is not there. So that kind of thing. There has to be an EI component between the administrator and the doctor also, because some studies have been done in the most stress-prone environment in the hospitals, namely the emergency department. And the stress levels are very high in ED. So, if it is not managed properly through administrative intervention, by rotation of duty, by ensuring that safety is provided to the healthcare workers, the logistics are provided, the drugs and the disposables are there, the equipment are working, that support system, if it is not there, if the administrator does not empathize with the doctor and try to put himself in the shoes of the doctor, what will the doctor do if the machine does not work at the last minute? So the whole organizational culture, the policies that you are formulating, the patient safety guidelines, the evidence-based care, and the equity in provision of healthcare. Don't deny anybody emergency treatment, even if he or she is not insured or is not entitled or something, or so and so is poor. So the first aid should not be denied, and that requires humane qualities. That AI cannot teach us. That requires humanity. So what will we choose, AI or EI? The first question is, can we manage without AI? In 21st century, there is much more demand for healthcare than before, because healthcare is available, it is accessible, patients are more aware, and this, we should be happy about it. The thing we can't be happy about is the fact that the number of trained doctors and healthcare professionals is woefully inadequate, especially in a country like ours. So technology, AI, can be a solution to get things done faster, to get things done cheaper, to get things done at patients' convenience, at doctors' convenience. And for good measure, AI is much better at record keeping than human beings, that we all know. So this is an era of digital health records, or EHR. We can't avoid AI. We can't, in fact, as healthcare administrators, there is no way we can manage without AI. So we can't. Next question is, can we manage without EI? Medicine will always remain an art as well as a science, and it cannot be practiced without compassion. So EI achieves, but on a more practical note, EI does achieve better doctor-patient relationship, better patient compliance, better clinical outcomes, because agar patient aapki baat manega, if the patient listens and obeys the advice of the doctor, then the clinical outcomes will be better. There is better communication and teamwork within the staff, so there are less conflict, everyone is happier, and a lot of studies have shown that lesser adverse events are committed when an organization encourages emotional intelligence and recognizes, I told you, soft skills. When there is a cohesive and happy working environment, lesser mistakes are made, and this is the hallmark of patient-centered care. So there are some articles which have said, found links between the organization goal of patient-centered care and their emphasis on training their healthcare workers to be more compassionate. They have in fact even done before and after studies of measuring the EI quotient of healthcare workers and then giving them 6 weeks training program and measuring their EI quotient later. The wonderful thing is that the patient satisfaction improved, certainly. The adverse events went down, the clinical outcomes were better, but the best part was the staff themselves were happier than they were before the training. For example, now this is the classical example. I think this is my last slide. Post-anesthesia, nausea and rigors. It is a known complication. It does happen. So AI can help in prediction. It can help in early warning. It can help you in early detection. AI can even send out an alert on the mobile or give a loud audio alert. Communication can be by nurse to the doctor or by the machine itself. All these are factors to achieve positive outcome after a post-anesthesia, nausea or rigor situation. However, the prompt treatment requires compassion. The understanding how scared the patient or the relatives might be, explanation to the patient and family, that AI cannot do. There EI comes in. The comfort and reassurance to the patient and family, instead of just brushing away and saying, haan, hota hai, some people have this, don't worry. That is not enough. So the time that you take, the hand that you put on the shoulder of the patient and the relative is EI. So this slide shows that half the management requires or can be done better with AI. but the half will always require a compassionate healthcare worker. So the future, according to me, in conclusion, would be AI plus EI. A scenario where artificial intelligence will be designed with emotional intelligence, and either the AI tools themselves will have an EI component. For example, robotic companion pets are being designed in Japan, which has the largest geriatric population in the world. Or emotionally intelligent designers will design better AI solutions. For example, an informed consent app, which makes sure that the patient is first shown the illness or the surgery and can watch a video of the surgery if he or she is so, and there are FAQs built into it. And even after that, if the patient has a question, then he approaches the doctor that this question was not answered by FAQs. I'll conclude by Fyodor Dostoevsky's statement, which I like, the quote I like very much. And he says that it takes something more than intelligence to act intelligently. Thank you very much. I've concluded.
Thank you, Dr. Surekha Kashyap. Now, the topic is open for discussion. Either you can put your questions in the chat box. I will keep on asking her, or one by one you can ask her questions directly. But two, I will start set the ball rolling by asking 2-3 questions which are there. One question
Yes.
put by Dr. Kritika Rawal is, would you say that AI is a boon to introvert hospital administrators? No, I think it is not, Kritika, but still I will ask Dr. Surekha to answer it.
Yeah,
She asked,
actually, yeah, AI as a tool for introvert hospital administrator.
yes.
AI, I don't think AI addresses the issue of personality. Personality traits are introvert and extrovert. Worldwide, hospital administrators tend to be more successful if they're extrovert. Because, as I told you, Johari windows, you have to have the window which people see should be large. If you are an introvert, you don't share your thoughts with others. And unless you share your thoughts with others, if you are that much of an introvert, then you cannot translate your vision to others. And if you cannot translate your vision to the others with whom you are supposed to work as a team, your administration is not a lone wolf job. You have to work as a team. In a team, if you are that much of an introvert where you're not sharing anything with your team, I'm afraid only AI will not cut it. AI can look after the data entry part of it. Maybe your electronic health records will be excellent, but these two things are disconnected.
Okay. Ma'am, AI in long term, what I feel is, according to this president, how rapidly we are progressing with AI is,
yes.
Will it be used ultimately for clinical decision making in true sense, or only in part supporting the decision making?
Sir, it has already started. It is already being used in remote areas of third world countries where doctors cannot reach. They are already using CDSSs to help because something is better than nothing.
Yes.
It is like the barefoot doctors of the 60s in China, right? China had barefoot doctors. We have ASHA workers, isn't it? In armed forces, we have battlefield nursing assistants who are not Army Medical Corps boys. They are fighting Jawans. We give them a crash course and make sure that at the battle line, they are able to at least prevent their buddy from dying. They are taught basic skills. So, I mean, if a human being can be given such a crash course to make sure that, at least the person doesn't die, I'm sure CDSS will be able to take over. The primary healthcare function is already happening, sir. Slowly it will progress to secondary and tertiary. But I feel that as I said, I have not seen a single resident in a clinical specialty who did not have a clinical decision support system on his mobile screen. And this is especially relevant for anesthesia and pediatrics because the dose calculation is a horrible thing and human memory is fallible. There is just this much that you can remember, and after that, human memory is likely to fail you. And that is why I feel that in clinical decision support system, AI can play a wonderful role, but it will be supervised by the clinician or the nurse who are trained.
Okay, thank you. Another question by Dr. Gopi Lakshman. Is AI feasible at the cost, other than the cost constraints of public sector healthcare in India? Cost
I would,
constraint.
this is such a wonderful question because it is inspiring me to request the youngster who has asked this question, please study, do a cost benefit or cost effectiveness analysis. Why not? Why not? Let us find out what is the cost, the capital cost of installing AI in a particular department. Then we find out what are the running cost of AI. Then we found out what is the upgradation cost of AI, and we define a time period, 5 years or 10 years. And then you find out how many errors did the AI prevent or avoid, how many lives were saved because the AI helped quick diagnosis, how many post-op complications were avoided because of robotic surgery vis-a-vis normal. And this data to some extent we've already had, no, the conventional surgery vis-a-vis laparoscopic surgery and keyhole surgery. People are doing cost effectiveness analysis of these all the time. So all we do is we take it one step further. And finally, there is already a study which has been done by in AFMC, in which I was a co-author, where they have done cost effectiveness analysis of chickenpox vaccine in armed forces recruits and jawans, right? So you use AI as a screening tool and do the capital and running cost of the AI for screening of a disease, and then you find out how many Indian rupees you saved by diagnosing the illness early. QALI, DALI, all this can be used, not only life saved, but quality of life, years gained. So this is a subject for further research, and it would be wonderful if trained hospital administrators take on this.
Another question by Dr. Rashmi. With growing AI, the employee will be in a fear of losing their jobs, because whether they will promote AI, because if something is replaced by a machine or a robot, is there going to be a fear of losing the job by an employee?
This is the same fear which was vocalized in the 80s when computers started hitting the market. A lot of employees, in fact, went on strike and all. And much before that, 100 years before that, the industrial workers on the factory floors went on strike when machines were installed. This is always a question which society has had to grapple with. But what happened? When big machines came, factory workers did not lose their job. They just learned to operate those machines. When computers came, they just needed upskilling. They needed to be retrained. All that will be required. And again, this is something in which a hospital administrator can do a wonderful job. In fact, the training should start. They are saying that AI-related training should also start at a medical school level or paramedical school level, same as EI. Amazingly, I found articles to support both the things. That there are articles which are saying that EI should be taught as a part of the syllabus in MBBS and in nursing syllabus and all. And the same way they are saying AI should be taught. So probably if we go to that level of maturity where we introduce AI related training as part of a normal curriculum or a paramedical, it will never take away any jobs. It will still require a human being to operate that particular AI and to read the findings given by the AI and to convey those findings to the nurse or to the clinician and to act on it. So this is not a very well-founded fear, although the fear is understandable. It always comes with every new technology, but we can't run away from it. AI is going to come whether we are prepared for it or not. So better to be prepared for it.
Yes. I will now invite Rear Admiral V.K. Singh, sir, for his comments on this. Sir, please come in, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me mention to you the data has become money now. I was in Karolinska in 2019, and all the data what they have collected, they are not putting the name, etc. of the person, and that data, which is anonymous, can be made into, they sell it for even running the department of the hospital. Now that is the context which is there abroad. As far as India is concerned, Mahajan Clinic, I met senior Mahajan, I met junior Mahajan, and they are using AI on X-rays to trace out the cancer or tuberculosis. And this is huge data they have. And they are also spent some money earlier, and now they are making money out of it. IBM with Manipal had tied up for the such data, and they working on various cancer cases, etc. Now, to cut the story short, I want you to mention that there is a huge cost center artificial intelligence has, and this data will be in future can be used even for running the hospitals. I am aware of that many such big organizations as after India, that can we have data. Tata Memorial Hospital is one they are looking for, and there are many such. Incidentally, Apollo Hospital has tied up, sold the data to particular one organization, and it came in the press. So this is a very good topic, Surekha, you have taken it. We are running the training program of 5 hours along with the PHFI on artificial intelligence in healthcare. And anybody who is more interested can get in touch with me. I'll give all the references and also other things which are happening today in the world. Thank you. Thank you, Surekha. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir.
Anyone else who wants to come in and give a comment? Yes, Dr. Sirikar.
Good evening, sir.
Please come in. Yes, please
Good evening,
come.
sir. Firstly, thank you, HA, for this webinar, and thank you, Kansurika, for making us wise in the thoughts of AI and AI.
Thank you, sir.
Nowadays, I'm doing e-consultancy on eSanjeevani OPD, and I just seeing almost 50 to 60 patients every day, sitting at home and reaching the villages of right from Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and Maharashtra and different places. I just wanted to second Kansurika's opinion that in that PHCs and CHCs, the ASHA workers are, because language is always a problem for interpretation, they are taking the history and are the facilitators with those patients, and what we are prescribing, they are communicating, and we are able to give the prescription within 5-10 minutes from here, and they are also taking the printout where hospitals are not there, and they're taking the medicines from pharmacy and getting the treatment done without moving from the house. And I'm sure with the CDAC, what the software which they have developed, with which we are able to do as of now, I'm sure once the AI component is also integrated, they are trying for making the OPD service of all government sectors on this by CDAC, so that only essential people have to go to hospital. So most of the doctors can prescribe the thing at their time from the eSanjeevani.opd, and only critical cases or really investigations are required, or consultation of super specialist physical examination is required. Those type of patients only will be going to the hospital. So that will reduce the most of the load. Almost 60% of the load is OPD in a hospital. I think I'm sure with the integration of the software and the AI, the OPD services to villages and primary healthcare will definitely improve with the time. Thank you for giving the opportunity.
Professor Dr. Shakti Gupta, sir.
Yes, actually, just I want to share that Surekha has done a good job actually in this lecture. At least she has sensitized the hospital administrator and clinicians across the country through this forum. What I want to say that actually there are a lot of potential and application of artificial intelligence in predictive medicine. So now you can predict actually by application of artificial intelligence that any adverse event going to take place to a patient even when patient is there in ICU. So it may be 24 hours in advance. You can predict that this patient is going to have a stroke or it is going to have a MI, so that you can take the precautions accordingly. The second example which has been given by Vicky Singh, actually, yes, Mahajan Imaging Center, who have a large number of setups in Delhi and outside Delhi also. I also spoke to them. Actually, they presented more than 30 papers on application of artificial intelligence in radio imaging actually. not in the country, but across in some other country actually, where there was a conference on only on application of AI in radio imaging actually. The third is that my son-in-law is working in IBM. So IBM is working on how we can use artificial intelligence in intubation. You must have observed when we do the intubation in a patient, actually it leads to so many, it leads to injury to the trachea, to the air passages. So this, by use of artificial intelligence, this can guide you, and this can prevent any injury while we are doing the intubation actually to the patients. And when the patient, especially when they are the unconscious patients, or when actually the reflexes are very less. And you must have observed that so many injuries are being created when we do the intubation. No, artificial intelligence is being used through this actually to train the doctors, especially the postgraduate students and nurses and other thing actually. And it has a lot of there is a tremendous potential for application of AI. No, it is being used actually in a big way actually. Like Surekha has said that actually the market is going to be in $1 billion actually. Where I was going through that, there is going to be invest about $46 billion to begin with in a year or so, then which is going to be increased. So I think every day actually we'll be using the artificial, and we are already using it actually, but not of that potential actually, or not of that level where we can exploit this technology. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Yashpal Sharma, sir, would you like to comment briefly on this? Dr. Yashpal?
Yeah, thank you very much. In fact, we have many senior colleagues here. I think we must request Dr. Dayakar is there, and many other people are there. So I think we'll request them first, then.
Okay. Dr. Dayakar? Yes, sir.
I'll just share with one experience with you all. Something what Madam has been talking about artificial intelligence. In HMRI 104, we started an experiment known as Doc in the Box. A technician will go with a box on a scooty. In that there will be stethoscope and other equipment which can be used to see the nose, see the ear, and take a ECG also if required, and record the temperature, etc. And he will be able to do a little bit of test like the slip test, sugar, blood sugar, urine putting, similar things. And all these things will be recorded on that. And then we had a system from called as any to many. This data will be broadcast type of thing. There will be doctors, 10 to 15 doctors who are logged in that time in shift systems. Anybody can pick it up that data, and they can give advice on that, and they will print out. That will come out as a prescription at the other end. Based on that prescription, the fellow will dispense the medicine. If some advice is required, like admitting, getting test done, it could be done. So that's something small step we did. And as I left it long time back, I do not know where is it now. So that's all.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Who wants to come in, sir?
Dr. Rao is there. Dr. Rao wants to say something.
Dr. M.V. Rao?
Please unmute yourself.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And then it's an excellent overview of AI and EI by Dr. Surekha Kashyap, and then the AHA administration also for putting us through. And in fact, I was, as Dr. Dayakar has been talking about the HMRI experiment, where incidentally, I was also his colleague at that particular point of time. And definitely, I mean, what I could see in the public health later on, wherever I have been working, along what Dr. Surekha has been mentioning, that how much AI can be useful in the public health sector, I am really very, very fascinated to see how the integrated disease monitoring system and then reporting system, the IDSP and all those things have been integrated in so many projects, where we were getting the real-time data from remotest corners of various places. and then putting it on to the clinicians for their advice. I think it has been from the very beginning, has been doing extremely well and extremely beneficial to all. And one word about the EI, what Dr. Surekha has been talking is also very, very relevant to hospital administrators, because by and large we have been seeing a lot of either it is a complaints or grievances or whatever it is. So many things have been coming into our chambers from the patients or from their attendants. I think there is a need to make every person, starting from even the security guards to the nursing to the housekeeping staff and everyone, to be aware on this EI relevance in delivering our patient-centered care. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Dr. Ashish, in fact, we are very lucky today that we have, all of our senior colleagues here for this webinar. I'm really grateful to all of you, sir, that, you really made it our day today. We have been, longing since quite long time that all of you should be here to bless us all. And I'm really thankful to Dr. Surekha Kashyap that, today with your lecture, many senior colleagues are here. And I must take this opportunity and request you all to please give us the topics of your interest, so that in the coming weeks we can request you to talk on the various subjects. I think our program this webinar has been programmed every first. We were doing it every week. Then because of the pandemic, we decided to do it fortnightly. And this has become very popular. And in fact, we keep on getting many calls. Now that for last almost a month, we were not doing it. People were saying, why are you not doing it? This is the appropriate time, please do it. So we decided that we'll start it. Now that today we have stalwarts in hospital administration sitting here, I will request you all, sir, please, if you can give your topics today, we are ready. Dr. Ashish will note it down today only. Then we'll get back to you as per your convenience. Dr. B.K. Singh is also here. I'll request him also. Dr. Shakti Gupta is here. Then we have Dr. Dayakar is there. Many, all the senior colleagues are here. I will, I have given a topic which I requested, the Dr. Dr. Pawan Kapoor. He has already agreed to talk on the pandemic, which is really a very good topic on the viruses, its variants, and the vaccination. So it is going to be a very good, interesting topic. But if any one of you, volunteers, I'll be really very happy today. So, any topic, if somebody wants to give today, I will be ready to take it. Dr. Ashish will be ready to note it.
Yeah.
Dr. VK is trying to say something.
Yeah, I will send it to you by mail. Definitely,
Thank you.
I will.
Great, sir.
And
Great,
thank
sir.
you for organizing such a wonderful initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. Grateful, sir. Grateful, sir.
So I would also like to inform all the members here that in the next month we are also going to have one topic from Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission. We are on material vigilance program, which is started. So I think that will be very great program. So we are lining that also in the next month after Dr. Pawan Kapoor's topic. So if there is nothing, we can conclude by saying, I will just put a very summarizing line here. While I will say artificial intelligence is the need of hour because of decreased resources, as Dr. Surekha Kashyap said, and also the driver being a less resource available in terms of manpower. More demand, less manpower, AI is going to be helpful. But we are Indians. Emotional intelligence with human touch is very essential component of fast cure and interpersonal relationship and satisfied customers. As well as she rightly said, the outcome prediction is better when EI is in place. I think that is what we have, the take back method. So we should have AI plus EI. What degree of each will decide with time. But what we feel is in coming times, AI is definitely going to overtake EI so far as tertiary care is concerned.
Dr.
Thank
Shakti
you.
wanted to say something.
Just I wanted to share actually that another topic of the lessons which we have learned during this COVID management, that now government has become aware actually, and you must have seen that that the management of hospital was a big challenge actually, and the government has realized that there is a need for professional management of healthcare institutions. Like the Chief Minister of UP, he has taken a decision that there should be trained people also actually. Why they are not able to take the hospital administrator? Because they are not available actually. I want to share that actually recently we had a meeting which we call as the Central Institute Body, which is a institute body of 22 AIMS in the country, and all directors are member. This was my first meeting over there, which is chaired by the health minister and all health secretary, and all those people are there. So my first agenda, I attended for the first time after I took over as a director, to establish Department of Hospitalization in all the 22 AIMS in the country for professional management of healthcare institutions. And you'll be happy to know that actually my first agenda which I took, that has been approved in principle by the health minister. And now he has asked me to help all the 22 AIMS in the country to establish the department in the first phase, and second phase to start MD in hospital administration. Because trained hospital administrators are not available as on today. And whenever there is advertisement, already there is a trained professional people actually, which we can say they are competent to handle the hospitals, which the government has also realized. In even J&K actually during the COVID actually they have put all their KS and ISAF officer on managing the hospital, because total chaos was there because of the so many factors, which I don't blame the doctors actually. I think this is a high time when we can take up these issues. The management of institutes and hospitals and medical colleges in the country, that should be professionally managed. And I am happy to share that today morning itself, I have written a letter, 4 pages, to the Chief Minister of UP, Aditya Yoginath, to establish departments in all medical colleges in the state of UP. Because now actually he has realized that there is a need for professional management of healthcare institutions. Just I wanted to share to that.
Thank you, sir. It's a great news for all of us, and we compliment your activities on that. But I would like to inform you one thing, that it was not only J&K. You know, the government of India has issued us guidelines and circular saying that all the DCs, all the commissioners should be put on the various duties in the various hospitals. So J&K was not an exception. We didn't allow that, and we were managing it very professionally. Thank you, sir. Thank you. We are grateful to you. I think Dr. V.K. Singh wants to say something.
No, just I wanted to thank Shakti for such an initiative, and we are available for any professional activities we can further for AHA or anybody. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Ashish, you can conclude now by saying thank you to everyone. Ashish, you're mute.
Sorry. No, okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, President, sir. Now to conclude, I must thank Colonel Dr. Surekha Kashyap for a very excellent presentation on an evolving topic, and all the participants, our senior members of AHA, our teachers and active members, and also others who have joined in for this session. And thanks to my AHA team in the back house, Deepak, Anjum and all, and Dr. Shivain for coordinating this activity and reaching out to all the people. And we look forward to your participation on after 2 weeks, after a fortnight at 4 o'clock with another topic by Dr. Pawan Kapoor already has been declared. You will shortly get a communication from AHA. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Kashyap.
Thank you, sir.
Very nice.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, ma'am.
Hello.